The irony of this podcast is that my clients do call me daddy. My name is Pamela, and I am professionally known as the Violatrix. You can find me at theviolatrix.com, and I am a 20-year Findom, financial dominatrix. Why am I doing this podcast? Because in recent times, Findoming, financial domination, has grown in popularity. And I am here to dispel myths and rumors, explain what it actually is, and how it differs from what people think conventionally a dominatrix is. I am also the author of the Ultimate Financial Domination Guide. And let me tell you how this all began. So first and foremost, the podcast was born out of the idea that Findoming is very misunderstood, as I said. And I had a very popular TikTok that was completely unrelated. It had to do with beauty aesthetics and plastic surgery. And it kind of leaked out what I did for a living. In conjunction with that, my two daughters, ages 20 and 13, had come to me and said, "Mom, there's a lot of women coming forward on TikTok saying that they are Findoms, and they're selling these courses for $500. They don't know the first thing about it, and they're scamming these women. And we need you to come out from the shadows with what you do." And I was like, over my dead body, why would I ever come out from the shadows, come out of the closet with this? It would utterly kill my beauty aesthetics and plastic surgery TikTok. And I was adamantly, vehemently opposed to the idea. And they basically shamed me and said, like, if you don't do this and help women, we don't know who you are. That's not who you are. So, of course, I was ground down to it. There was another element to me making the decision to come forward with this, because in my day-to-day vanilla life, I'm a trad wife, I'm a stay-at-home mom, I am a soccer mom. This is not something that I really wanted to, again, come out of the shadows. But someone with whom I had a business dealing knew what I did for a living. And I don't want to make this sound like it was a full extortion case, but it ultimately did end up in court. So at this point, I had to make the decision. Was I going to out myself and honor what my daughters were asking of me? Was I going to do it on my terms, or was I going to allow someone else to do it for me? And I made the decision to do it on my terms. So here I am. So what is a Findom? A Findom is a financial dominatrix. What that entails is typically a man, sometimes a very successful man. My clients are successful to the extent that the majority of my clients are attorneys, and they vary from litigation attorneys to in-house corporate attorneys. And you typically have, in my case, I have C-suite executives, men that run Fortune 25 companies, Fortune 50 companies, CEOs, CFOs, doctors, lawyers, surgeons, famous athletes, and so forth. And they come to me because they desire a release from the daily monotony of having to be the all-American traditional alpha male. They're running corporations. They're running their families. They're responsible. There's so much on their shoulders. And at some point, they want to release that control to someone else. And they come to me. Now, it's not your average man who just thinks, oh, I need a release, I'm going to call a Findom. It doesn't work like that. These are men that somewhere way back in their probably puberty, prepubescent years, had an encounter with a dominant woman, and something kind of hard-locked in their psyche. And they were always drawn to dominant women. Now, they don't tend to marry them. And this is something that, again, especially in American culture, it doesn't, when you deal in European terms, especially Germany, Netherlands, it's very open. But in America, we expect men to be alpha men, day in, day out, 24/7. And it's not socially acceptable for a man to submit to a woman. So these, again, are men that are preconditioned to wanting to submit to typically a strong, beautiful, smart woman. Not saying I'm all of these things, but these are the drivers. And how the kink is actually born is, for example, A boy might be in his teenage years. Say he's over at a friend's house and that friend has older sisters and they have some girlfriends over. Maybe they're getting ready for a date or prom, and there's hairspray and lipstick and all sorts of music and activity, and the girls are maybe scantily clad, and all of these sensory elements will lead to this intoxicating mix of a boy, especially if, say, the boys are like peeking in or, teasing the girls, and say the girls slam the door, call them a nasty name, insult them. This is the perfect recipe for a man hard-locking in his psyche, wanting to be teased, denied, humiliated as the years go on. And I'll get more into the psychology of the kink, but again, these are often scenarios that I have found in my 20 years of doing this. When I deep dive my clients and I ask, where did this first begin? These are all the common elements. A really popular one is, say, a gentleman who has a pantyhose, a foot, or like a foot fetish or pantyhose fetish. That typically you're going to deal with men that are of a certain age range that their teacher had walked over to them, maybe scolded them, maybe smacked them with a ruler. And during that process, perhaps she brushed up against him at his desk while she was wearing nylons. Maybe she had on, stockings and stockings and stilettos. And bam, just like that, his brain was forever rewired, because that intoxicating mix of humiliation and a tease in his mind with the elements of something so alluring, so seductive, so intoxicating, and that's it. And from that point forward, he will forever get excited by seeing pantyhose, feet, stilettos, that sort of thing. So getting back to what is Findom, you're dealing with men who would like to surrender themselves to a stronger woman. And in my case, I do it over the phone. I am cyber. I charge $3.99 a minute for these men to contact me. I work for a service. I work always behind a paywall. And it can really vary. I tend to cater to the white collar. I tend to cater to these businessmen. And I work in fewer clients, longer calls, whereas most Findoms will work in volume. I'm at the top tier of charging of cost per minute and cost per session, because my experience has made that possible for me. But Findom is thrown around a lot because on social media, you can't say dominatrix, you can't say femdom. Findom seems to be the popular vernacular because it's sanitized in a way that doesn't seem to get flagged. But findoming is not necessarily what exactly I do. What falls under the category of findoming is anything where the man is exchanging money. He's giving the woman money, gifts, or spoiling her to be teased, denied, degradation, all sorts of humiliation and submissive tendencies that will fall under the umbrella of findom, femdom, domina, mistress, goddess. What do they refer to us as? How do they address us? Mistress or goddess. So there are so many offshoots and so many branches to what this is that it's really hard to categorize it. But the basic impetus of it is a man who wants to be controlled to a certain degree. So why do men want this? They want to hand over control. They are not comfortable asking their wives for this. Typically, they are ashamed and do not want their wives knowing, or simply, most often when I ask a gentleman, a client, does your wife know? Have you tried this with her? They come back with pretty much the same response. It's either typically, no, I would never, or I tried it a few times when we first got married. She just couldn't understand it. It didn't work. It didn't click. And so what I find is these men typically want to compartmentalize this. This is their dirty little secret. and they don't want to involve their wives or family, which is really how I think it should be handled, because it's a kink, it's a fetish. For most men, it's not a lifestyle. I do have lifestyle clients, and that's a whole different subject, which I can get into later. But most men want to live their normal lives in a vanilla marriage and outsource the kink. Again, I am cyber. I'm over the phone. I am phone only, or phone with cam, or phone, cam, and chatting, any of the above. So it can really, really vary what a man comes to me for. Do I get naked on camera? I have. In the early days when I first started this, my life circumstances led me to such a thing. How does a nice girl from Hershey, Pennsylvania fall into this? Well, I certainly didn't go out seeking it. Necessity is the mother of invention. And when I started, I needed something that was work from home, and I didn't have to pay a babysitter. And at that time, in the early 2000s, there were no such things. So was I getting naked on camera? Yes. I had responded to an ad that I had seen in the New York Times for Scores Gentlemen's Club in New York City was hiring what they called chat hostess models. You had to be pretty enough to be a model, but it was Scores Gentlemen's Club that was launching their online division. Now, this was before Facebook. Facebook was just in its early infancy stages, but had not yet rolled out. It was still like a on-campus type thing. We were still in the MySpace era, to give you an idea of time frame. And Scores was at the forefront of the kind of the pioneers of this. So I applied, I was accepted, and it was such a rudimentary system. It was a chat room based forum where I would be on cam. And again, I was not starting as a Findom. I was starting as just the run-of-the-mill girl next door. And most of us at that time were in the submissive category. So this led to, being in a chat room, and you'd have to kind of look really pretty and flash a little of this, show a little bit of that to get a gentleman to take you private, like a gentleman's club. And then once a guy takes you private, then you branch off into like a private room, and then the dollars start rolling and that sort of thing. It was the most demeaning, degrading, humiliating experience of my life, because you were at the mercy. First of all, men had never seen anything like this. So you can only imagine nowadays with the armchair quarterbacks and the Cowboys, the way men behave. And this isn't a slight to men, but in this particular case, this was the Wild West of the porn industry, of the adult industry. And men became utterly unhinged in these chat rooms. The things they were saying, the things they were asking for, it was a really degrading experience. So it was at that point, a client had taken me private, and he said, listen, you're way too smart. You're way too nice of a girl to be doing this. Have you heard of this other platform? And I said, no. And he said, you don't have to sit in a chat room. You don't have to be, begging for dollars and to be taken private. And it's like a private double-blind phone system where you're just waiting by the phone for a client to call you, and then you choose if you're on camera. And I said, this sounds great. Signed up for the site, never looked back. The one thing I can tell you was, though, immediately when I did this, even with Scores, the money was unlike anything I'd ever seen, because you can see the dollars rolling like a cash register. They're just rolling. So the amount of money I made as a single mom who was working 2 jobs to dig out of a situation, it was nothing I had seen before. And very quickly, it became clear that it was going to replace my daily income, my 2 jobs. And within, I think it was about 2 months, I was able to quit 2 jobs and do this full time. So it was also through this experience that I decided to go from submissive to dominant. When I joined the second service, the clients were coming to me and they said, will you dominate me? And I was like, I wouldn't have the first idea of how to dominate you. They were like, that's okay. You look evil. We'll teach you to do this. You look the part. And so I was like, oh, okay. And they taught me how to do this. And I will digress here for a second. I remember my earliest client. I said, well, I don't know what to do. And he said, here's what we're going to do. I'm going to get naked for you on camera, and you're going to sing Old MacDonald had a farm. And every time you say an animal, I'll make the sounds. I was like, oh, okay. So we went on cam. At this point, he didn't even care if I was on cam. They do like the early clients did like me looking at them, staring at them, but it had nothing to do with me taking off clothes or getting naked. That was the scores experience. This had to do with actually many of them asked for me to be in like corporate dress, something similar to what I'm wearing now. Some of them wanted costumes, but I began a session. Old MacDonald had a farm, E-I-E-I-O, and on this farm he had a pig, E-I-E-I-O, and then he would say oink oink here and an oink oink there, and this went on for, I swear to you, 3 hours, to the point where I ran out of animals. Duck, chicken, horse, like it was insane, but I made an insane amount of money doing that. Then came my next client who, all I remember was he was a very handsome guy. He was a pilot, and he was in French Guiana. If my life depended on pointing out French Guiana on a map, I couldn't. But nonetheless, very sweet, very French. And he would call me as he was getting off the plane. He was a pilot, and when he would call me as he was getting off the plane, I'm about to check into his hotel to make sure that I was all set up for him. And he would want me in a certain look, staring into the camera. And he wouldn't say much. But he had these beautiful blue eyes, and a really good looking tall guy. And he would get to his hotel room, and he would undo his tie from his pilot's uniform. And he would undress, almost not unlike Mr. Rogers. And he would take off his shirt and tie and hang them up, and his pants and hang them up. And then one by one, he would take off his shoes. And he would get totally naked. And then he would go over to a bag, and unzip the bag or the suitcase, and he would pull out a pair of tennis shoes. And he took those tennis shoes, and he untied them, and he tied each one of those shoes to his balls. One shoe from one ball, one shoe from the other ball. And then he proceeded to move the furniture around so that he could climb up on the furniture, and he would jump around the room making monkey sounds. Just being like, just jumping with the tennis shoes swinging from his ball sack. And I was being paid, again, $3.99 a minute to watch this. And he was smiling. He was having the time of his life. I didn't have to do a thing, just simply stare at him. So I was like, okay, I really need to learn more about domination, because this was just like the scratch of the surface. I had men that would ask me to just put on pantyhose and stilettos and just swear at them, degrade them. So a little bit more about my clients. Who are they and where are they from? They're global. I have found that the men in the USA are great clients. My clients typically come from greater cities. You get a lot from Manhattan, Long Island, New Jersey. San Francisco is a huge hub, and of course, LA. Now, every now and then, I'll get a call from a gentleman from, say, like the Bible Belt. You hear a Southern accent, I will know immediately within the first 30 seconds of picking up the phone. Now, 20 years in, I will almost immediately know what this gentleman's going to ask for, who he is, where he's from, just by his accent. So the minute I hear a Southern drawl, or I hear Bible Belt kind of connotation to the voice, or if he says ma'am, I know immediately what I'm in for. The Bible Belt guys are stay and pay type men. They're very gentlemanly, and they typically go to very specific fetishes. You're going to go straight to gooning, which is where they just kind of drool and lose their mind and over again want to be brainwashed and told the same thing over and over again. They want something to do with the Bible, and they want anything that is going to intertwine their extremely oppressive Bible Baptist religious upbringing, and they want to do something that's going to shame it, that's going to scorn it, that's going to hell hath no fury for what I was indoctrinated with as a teenage boy, the shame, the oppression. So I have had men that have literally taken out their wives' Bibles from Bible study and wanted to orgasm into their wives' Bibles. I had a man one time ask me to sing him Amazing Grace while he worked himself into an orgasm. And I'm Amazing Grace, how sweet the sound. He's, ah. And then I had a client who asked me to tell him over and over again that he was jerking for Jesus, that this is what Jesus wanted and he was going to jerk for Jesus. And I'm like, okay, you're jerking for Jesus. He's like, harder. You're jerking for Jesus. More. You're jerking for Jesus. He's like, tell me you hate God. I was like, no, absolutely not. I draw the line there. I'm like, I'm not going to burn in hell because you are jerking for Jesus. Absolutely not. So I do have my boundaries, believe it or not. There's some things, this is my first podcast episode, so I'm not going to get into the real nitty gritty. I'm sure that's what you guys want. And there's some things that may get me banned on multiple sites, if not most platforms. And I would probably lose, if I have 3 viewers who are seeing this, I'd probably lose at least 2 of them. So what are my hard lines when a client calls me on the first try? And I don't take all clients. There are certain red flags that I look for. But my hard lines, of course, I shouldn't even have to say this, but I'm going to say this. Anything having to do with severe age play. Now, that said, when a lot of men want to role play. If a man wants to role play, I will do it. I had a guy one time, a lawyer from San Francisco, who was utterly obsessed with his stepdaughter. And that didn't come out until later in the conversation. So anything that deals with 18 plus, but a lot of these guys at the onset of the call they're not going to come out of the gates and tell you what their fetish is. If it's something that crosses a line, they're going to ease you into it. And boy, oh boy, do I have a story about ATM. If you don't know what that stands for, that's ass to mouth. But I will save that for later. That's my most horrific story. But my hard lines when a person calls me, if they ask, rarely do they ask, but when they ask, what are your hard lines? You know that you better get strapped in because it's going to be a bumpy ride on this call. But I tell them immediately, I don't say no age play because that should go without saying. But I say no potty play, no bathroom play, anything that has to do with the bathroom, no blood and no needle play. And outside of that, I do have men. This has been a more recent in the last few year thing. I do have men that will call me and want to do scenarios about their wives being kidnapped and tortured in the most heinous of ways. So I have to come up with a role play, like a bunch of guys just got released from prison and these guys are prison hungry and they break into your house and they take you. And that one almost crosses a line for me because these guys, if I'm really good with the scenario, then they just want to go harder. Oh, what are we going to do this time? Are we poking things into it? No, we're not. I told you no needle play. So that one like crosses a little bit of a line for me. But for the most part, I don't typically have problems with these things. I did have a gentleman that called me very early on, and he was telling me that, for lack of a better reference, he was telling me that basically he was involved in the Illuminati. Do I believe it? I don't know. But what he told me was this, that he belonged to a secret society, that for $10,000 a plate, he would go to these dinners that were very underground with the most elite of Hollywood, and that they would bring in women that would specialize in stage shows that had to do with exotic animals. And he went into tremendous detail about these things. And sometimes the women that were on stage were related to each other. And I to this day, I'm really not certain if this guy was just trying to call me and shock me, because that's another thing. Some of these men get off on the idea of telling you something, especially when they find out that you're new or you're pure or you're innocent. Some of them get off on telling you the most crazy tall tales. I remember a guy about 2 years ago, he was in Vegas. He was obsessed with, and I'm just going to put this out there because everybody knows this is the most popular fetish in Findom is BBC. It stands for Big Black Cock. And who is obsessed with Big Black Cock? Your average white CEO, gentleman, corporate professional guy, married, 2 kids, summer house, vacations, that guy. He's your next door neighbor. And this guy had called me. He was a lawyer or an accountant, and he had sent me through my platform a picture of an African guy in the brush with like a 14-inch cock. It was like dragging on the ground. And I was like, okay. He's like, I went on this safari, this very expensive safari, and a bunch of women from the UK found this guy and went off in the brush with him. And like, I completely bought into this story, and he's going on and on about how these guys on the safari, like, they believe that white men should all be, what's the word for castrated, that white men should all be castrated and turned into eunuchs because they shouldn't procreate. Now, at the time, I'm not realizing this is a fetish. This guy is luring me into this thing as a fetish. But nonetheless, I bought in lock, stock, and barrel. I'm like, oh my God. And he's telling me that at nighttime, the natives kind of come out from the brush and they try to drug these guys, and they make friends with them, like sitting around the fire, and they drug them to basically get them to fall asleep and cut off their penises. So anyway, the story was so outrageous, but he had pictures. So at another point, I'm talking to a client. So I have this picture saved in my platform, and I send it to another client, and he's like, this is the oldest BBC picture in the book. Just Google it. It's like the prototype for BBC. Like, is it a real guy? Yes. But this guy totally told you a story. So again, that's a very common, it's a very common fetish, and one that I get quite a bit. And what do these guys want to do with BBC? I'll get into that more later. Do I get turned on by my clients? No, I do not. I don't find any of this a turn on. I will tell you that I am utterly curious, especially in the beginning. Now the curiosity factor is kind of worn off 20 years in. There's very little. It takes an act of God to shock me at this point. I don't think there's anything I haven't heard. One of the things that shocked me was a young man that called me probably 5 years ago, who had been sexually abused as a teenager on a camping trip by his best friend's father. And he would call me to play out that scenario because, unfortunately, it still got him aroused. But in this particular case, he was going on vacation with his girlfriend, and he wanted to get it out of his system before this prolonged vacation. I've had quite a few young men call me throughout the years to replay or walk them through some similar situation of whether it was assault or molestation or pedophilia. I've had many men call me over the years. I had one guy last year who called me to be his therapist. And I said, you understand that I'm not a real therapist? He said, yes, but so much of what you do deals with psychology and understanding men. Nothing in traditional psychology has worked for me. And $3.99 a minute is a better rate than my traditional psychologist. So I took him on, and I think we made great strides. He said that in 2 sessions, we were able to get to more. So the bottom line is, it's not all falling under the umbrella of kink and domination and fetish, and my clients putting on panties underneath their suit or writing the Violatrix on their cock in indelible marker and going to the bathroom and taking a picture of it between board meetings. It's not all that. Sometimes it can deal in therapeutic release for these men, and sometimes it can deal in, real life scenarios. So do I get turned on? No. Do I get fascinated? Yes. Do I like being shocked? Depends on the shock. And do I find the submission of alpha men arousing? No. Do I like the money? Yes. Do I get aroused by the money? 100%. Do I get aroused by the gifts? Yes. Although I tell my clients, do not pay me in gifts. I don't need gifts. I need the cash. So anybody who sees this and thinks that they can gift me something, don't ever use Throne. I'm going to throw Throne right under the bus right now. Every man that has bought me something from Saks, Neiman, Chanel, Gucci in the last month on Throne, nothing ever arrived. Or if it came, it was a guy bought me a pair of sunglasses from Balenciaga through Throne, and they came big enough to fit like Andre the Giant. Do I get turned on? I keep circling back to this because there were times in the beginning that I can't say that I was turned on, but I was utterly fascinated by these men that are vanilla, corporate, have families, have children, and yet they want to get undressed within a group of guys and just have a bunch of guys savagely ravage them. That was a curiosity to me, and I can't say it was a turn on. I'm sure there was something. There are things that turn me on, but that's why I don't take those calls. That's why I'm a dom and not submissive. Am I a dom in real life? Depends. Ask my family. They'll tell you. They'll tell you that I'm more of a Gestapo policewoman in my household. But no, I am married to an extremely alpha man. And it's funny. My husband is actually one that created the name the Violatrix. And I didn't like it. I thought it sounded like violence, but everybody else liked it, and it was rare. It was different, so it became the brand. But I remember my husband saying to me, I can't believe I'm going to say this to you, but you need to be a bigger bitch. And he's like, treat your clients the way you treat me when I leave something out in the kitchen, and you're going to be just fine. I was like, oh, okay. Do I take clients IRL in real life? I just started taking clients IRL. My clients have asked me for years to do IRL in real life sessions, and I have such OCD that the idea of them squirting something on me or getting near me makes my skin crawl. Even in a fantasy scenario, I will tell them, okay, you want to do a fantasy where a bunch of girls are, they want to be pegged. And I'm like, even in a fantasy, I would never put a strap on. Like you wouldn't catch me dead with strap on. So even in a fantasy scenario, I will outsource that to an escort in the fantasy. I will bring in a girl at your expense to peg you and wear a strap on. I'm not even doing it in fantasy. Or they say, would you, do this or that? And I'm like, no, absolutely not. Even in fantasy, I outsource it. So I did start taking IRL clients recently. I worked with an agency. I was very specific about what I would and wouldn't do. And why did I do this? Because the industry has been slow. When the economy takes a downturn, this is one of the first discretionary spending items that someone will take out of their budget. So I was kind of forced to kind of pivot. I also knew that I was going to be branching out to do something like a podcast, something with media. And I thought, how can I really speak on this if I've never seen someone IRL? Was the money good? It was insane. Absolutely insane. Would I do it again? I don't want to. I probably will. The money was that enticing. Was I grossed out? 100%. Anybody that comes within like a foot of me, I immediately get like the hairs on the back of my neck stand up. So, was I able to, take a guy and shove my foot in his mouth and choke him? Yes. Yeah, I'm good with my feet going down someone's throat, but that's about the threshold and the limit. And I'll be more than happy to talk more about IRL. I have found, though, that my clients for years, my regular clients who ask me to take them on IRL, all I would have to say is my first line of defense was, not until you're my client for at least a year, until I know I'm comfortable with you. We can talk about it then. Then they usually forgot. Or I would say, yeah, we can discuss it. My starting rate would be $20K for a weekend. That usually kind of stop them, push them off the idea. Some it didn't. And then I had to go back to I must know you for an X amount of period of time. And here's the things, I have to be flown business class. And then you start with the list and then it just kind of falls off. But there's a dungeon in Woodland Hills that a lot of my clients from LA, like I've sent my clients to dungeons, to professional dominatrix. I have also, one of the things that I do, I often have my clients meet a guy on Grindr, and then they'll go on cam for me, or they'll bring in a lady of the night, an escort, and I'll dominate them both on camera, or I'll tell her what to do to him. That's a common thing I will do. I will do anything to get out of, will you, pee on me in person. I'll do anything to avoid that rabbit hole. I hope you enjoyed the first episode. If anything stood out to you, or if you have any questions, by all means, please let me know. My content is only as strong as the feedback and the questions that I'm receiving. I have stories that will run. I could literally talk for 10 years straight, but I need to know what is the content that you guys are interested in hearing. My book, The Ultimate Financial Domination Guide, which again was written because the women on TikTok were asking me for resources. It's not a tell-all. It is simply a guide. So if you're a gentleman and you think you're going to, buy this book and be able to, get off to it, it's not going to happen. This is the little backstory on how I ended up in the business, and then a 2-year guide to start to finish how to do PSO, phone sex operator, cam girl, findoming, even submissive girl next door. As I tell the women who follow me, findoming is the last niche that you should go into. If you're going to go into this in any sort of phone or cam, you should go into dirty housewife, my husband's away in the military, dirty co-ed, naughty nurse, lonely woman next door. The number one search, Pornhub puts out its end of the year search results for the United States, globally, and then state by state. Do yourself a favor and Google the state by state Pornhub statistics on what people are searching for on Pornhub. Your head will pop off. But the number one searches last year for Pornhub were trad wife and Mormon wife. So very few men are actually looking for dominant women. So if you are thinking Findom and you're buying into all these women, there's a woman on TikTok. I have to remember, I have to find her name. She's a black woman, and she strictly caters to black Findoms. And she's selling the biggest bunch of bullshit. And she's one of the ones. There was a woman named Claire or Blair who had a course. I got her taken down by discrediting her. $500 course, and I am now teaching a lot of her students. But anyway, I want you to be very careful of the TikTok doms and don't buy into what they say. It's not easy. If you're not naturally dominant, do not go into this. Yes, it's acting to a certain degree, but if you're naturally submissive, go into that. And where can I be found? I have a free YouTube masterclass. It's at the Violatrix, Violatrix. I think it's at Saint Siren, Saint to Siren, which is also my Instagram, which is also my TikTok. You're more than welcome to ask questions underneath my free masterclass YouTube videos and my Instagram. You probably should refrain from asking me anything under TikTok because the TikTok violations. I had a full account taken down. So I will not engage too much with this on TikTok. And as far as my book is concerned, the ultimate Financial Domination Guide, it's available in Barnes & Noble. It's available on Kindle. It's like free if you have Kindle. It's on Amazon. And for some reason, and I don't know why, they're scalping it for 3 times the cost on eBay. Thank you for joining me. I look forward to seeing you guys again.